Hi, I'm Ellen Karis. I'm a stand-up comedian, actress, podcast host of Karis Comedy Corner, a writer, author, and now a documentarian. Before that, I was a CPA, an accountant, and a finance analyst for a large Wall Street firm. But one of the things I am most proudest of is that I am a New Yorker. I have lived in Manhattan the majority of my life, but never have I seen so far anything like the effects of COVID-19. But pre-pandemic, we weren't quite certain exactly how was it going to affect us. Was this just a really, really bad flu? Was it in the air? All I need to do was wash my hands and wear a mask? But what we did know is that it was real and it was coming. And our mayor had given us a heads up that we were headed for a lockdown. For most of us, it was a break. Hey, we can chill out, we'll binge watch. It's New York City. We can get whatever food we want. Didn't matter. And I think that in the beginning, it was a little bit of a party. But after a few weeks, all of a sudden, it really started to kick in. Those lines at the grocery store were really, really long. You couldn't get your Whole Foods delivery in a couple of hours. It was days, maybe a week away. There were shortages of supplies. We started hearing about numbers of deaths. They were real. They were hitting our neighbors. It was really happening. We knew people at hospitals. They didn't have the proper PPE. There was a shortage of masks. What was going on? We live on top of each other. They kept talking about 6 feet apart. It's like, what does that mean? How am I going to ride the subway? I would say about mid-April, I finally really ventured out. And I walked over to Lexington Avenue, not far from where I live. And it was like a ghost town. All that was missing were tumbleweeds. They're the family businesses that have been there for generations. The butcher shop, the baker, the shoemaker, the specialty stores. But they were gone. As each of these historical retail places close up, it was like a piece of history being chipped away. We were losing our story. And we thought it would be a really good time to interview some real people from different walks of life to find out what their experiences were, how they feel. Because New Yorkers, it's about what's in your soul. Here's some really great stories from some really fabulous people. We got to talk to the quintessential New York couple, Romeo and Phyllis Salta. They live on the Upper West Side. Romeo is a native New Yorker. His family was in the restaurant business for many decades, but Romeo decided that he wanted to be a lawyer and practices law. He knows a lot about real estate because he and Phyllis invested in residential properties on the Upper West Side. Phyllis was a girl with a dream from upstate New York. She came to New York City. She wanted to be a dancer, an actress, and she followed her dreams for a while, and then she decided to go over to the other side and help cultivate talent. Here's their story. Upper West Side residents.
That's right.
And and Romeo, you are a lifelong New Yorker?
Yeah.
In New York City? 1977, came down from upstate New York.
From upstate New York. Your father was in the restaurant business?
Yes, for many, many years. In New York from 1952 to 1994.
And you are an attorney?
I'm an attorney.
And Phyllis?
I started out in theater 100 years ago, ended up with a small restaurant in the West Village a few decades ago, and stay-at-home mom most of the time, but did fundraising for New York City Ballet. And
you also own real estate?
Yes.
Residential properties?
Yes.
On the Upper West Side?
Yes.
So, what was that like? The demand for that?
Whenever there was a vacancy, it got snapped up the same day, within hours.
COVID, it's starting to get serious.
Yeah.
It hits New York City.
Yeah. And that story came out of that attorney who visited Italy and got sick with COVID. And I heard from some of my colleagues, so-and-so was down at the Supreme Court on Adams Street, and a lot of people got sick. With regard to the Upper West Side, there was a lot. All my tenants wanted to stay home. I mean, they didn't want to move out. They were working remotely. It was a combination of panic and paranoia, I think. And people were nervous. Just maybe a year ago, I could rent an apartment in a couple hours. I had 2 vacancies out of seven tenants where we live. And we couldn't fill them. Restaurants were closed for the most part. Everything shows are closed. Movies are closed. Entertainment's all closed. Office buildings are closed. And even when they're open, nobody's going.
Phyllis, you are involved in the performing arts and Lincoln Center and the ballet.
That was a part of our lives and our kids' lives forever. And a lot of kids' lives. They would do outreach to all of the public schools, have special days that they could come in and not have to pay. What I'm not seeing now is hope. I'm not seeing hope. Even after 9/11, I'm not seeing the fight. I'm not seeing the New York fight. I'm not seeing that we're going to get out there and do it anyway.
You go downtown a lot. What is
I used to.
What is the atmosphere?
I tell you,
down there, and there's been a lot of violence down there. There's a lot of protests on the Brooklyn Bridge.
It looks like a movie, a post-apocalyptic movie. That's what it looks like these days. It's desolate. I'm in fear of the court system, actually. There isn't any support for civil cases. Criminal cases are being processed, but even there, people are let go. Statistically, that increases crime. What I'm seeing here is it just brought back the 70s to me. Let's dump them here. And, well, there's an emergency. We have to dump them here. But there's, the point was they can't social distance in the shelter, so we'll put them in the hotels here. Well, they're not social distancing here either.
Right.
We have 3 robberies on just a block away of restaurants and stores and smashing windows.
Rag and Bone, I believe,
Rag
on
and Bone,
Columbus Avenue, I heard.
Cassis, Parm, Pomodoro, they all got robbed. And I frankly, I don't think there's any systemic coordination from the top on how to address crime in the city. At this point, there has to be an effort where neighbors watch for neighbors, because otherwise, the police will come after the fact. The police will come to take pictures. My fear is this time there's been such damage done to the economy of this city that the bounce back, if it'll come, will be much longer to arrive. I remember the 70s. It wasn't all bad. I mean, there were certain areas you wouldn't want to go to, and there were issues as a whole, and but people in a lot of parts of Manhattan were having their parties. The rich were doing their thing. I remember a lot of action.
Do you think New York City is dead?
No, it's heading
Life
into
support.
It's heading into a coma right now. Wall Street supports the city. I mean, that's a fact. And without the tax base here, it's not going to be tenable. And on top of that, the business structure, the business scene really has to improve. And that means everything has to improve, from Broadway to Wall Street. And that's to everybody's benefit, to actors, waiters, shop owners, everybody. They support everybody. Everybody supports everybody. And if you take away one piece of the puzzle, everything else collapses.
We got to sit down with Al Martin, Brooklyn born. He owned a home in Staten Island for years. He is a mainstay in the comedy club community in New York City. He owned New York Comedy Club, and he is the current owner of Greenwich Village Comedy Club and Broadway Comedy Club. Both very, very successful. Shows 7 nights a week. Al knows the theater district. Al knows anything, it's about location, location, location. You are a Brooklyn boy, huh?
Yes, born and bred. Midwood/Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn.
So you have seen this city evolve for many, many decades.
Yes.
We are in very different and interesting times.
Yes.
So you are the comedy club owner of Broadway Comedy Club, located on 53rd Street between 8th and 9th Avenue, and Greenwich Village Comedy Club on McDougal Street in Greenwich Village. You've been in the comedy business for how long?
30 years. This will be, this is 30 years.
How was the comedy club business for you? 2018, 2019?
2018, 19 were great years. You know, things were booming. The city was, the perception of it was pretty safe. People liked going out. The economy was humming. We were having banner years. We opened, I believe, in 2003 or 2004.
And then how long have you owned Greenwich Village Comedy Club?
Since 2012.
And how was that doing pre-COVID?
Oh my God, that was knocking them dead. I mean, Greenwich got to the point that we were selling out the weekend shows on Tuesday and Wednesday online.
We find out that New York City is the epicenter.
We got a directive that the weekend shows can only be at 50% capacity. So we went Friday and Saturday at 50%. Then on Sunday, the New York Times broke a story with a picture outside of the Comedy Cellar with a crowd congregated outside of it. And I said to myself, this is no good. This is going to result in us getting closed completely. And it wasn't really their fault. I know, because we were open that weekend, the cellar was definitely at following the mandates of 50% capacity. But it's that gotcha picture that someone took that got it to the New York Times. And then that night, the directive came out from the city, email blast to all clubs and restaurants, that you, effective 9 a.m., cease operations. That was March 16th. We immediately notified our employees that they should apply for unemployment, that we had to lay them off. And then as time went on, as we got information on PPP, the loans for businesses, the great government assistance for businesses were that they would allow you to take a loan and create debt for yourself that you never had because they closed you down. You know?
Broadway has shut down. The hotels have shut down. What was your reaction to that when you came back to the club and you saw what was going on?
You get the feeling of an apocalypse has occurred. You see people walking around with blank, stares.
Have you been in contact with any Broadway producers or any of the theaters around?
Yeah, you cannot afford to pay union rates 100% and your rent and only open at 25% capacity. You lose money.
What percentage of your business in Broadway Comedy Club and Greenwich Village Comedy Club is tourism?
I would still say 50% of either club could be tourism.
So here we are, 6 months later. You are
closed.
Still closed. So what guidance have you gotten from New York City and New York State for your business?
I understand that life is precious, but there has to be a balance between protecting people and opening an economy, because there's going to be nothing left if you keep it shut down much longer. On top of all of that, the city is talking about proceeding with the congestion pricing, making it, $20 just to come into Manhattan, besides the $20 you pay on the bridge, and besides the ridiculous parking. Any city in the world, when they want to bring up the profile of their city, offers businesses tax abatements, offers businesses tax incentives, real estate opportunity zones to open up businesses. The city of New York goes the opposite way. Oh, we're going to raise the sales tax, or we're going to raise property tax.
What about the homeless situation out in Times Square?
Well, this is all very reminiscent of when I was growing up. It's, they're taking the homeless out of wherever shelters they were, but I think we need to create zones of where we can put homeless people to live that are not going to scare people that paid a lot of money for their homes. You have an accounting background, right? Mm-hmm. Add it all up. The businesses are not collecting sales tax. So that's because they're closed. So sales tax is off the board as a revenue stream for the government. Then when you pay rent to your landlord, he pays property taxes. But if the landlords are not getting the rent from you, at some point they're not able to pay their property taxes. What happens to banks getting their mortgage payments? So this is going to work its way up the chain. So the government is not also getting sales tax. They're not. How about the people that are unemployed? They're not getting payroll taxes. We have gotten a couple of moratoriums on evictions. That does not mean the rent is not due. So for many businesses, the rent is piling up.
What about entrepreneurs that just opened up an establishment? Where do they go from here?
If I had to retire tomorrow, I could. But, a lot of the people that are my competitors and that I've been talking to recently, they just got into the business 4 or 5 years ago. They put everything they had in life into trying to build a business. They did everything that they were taught to do their whole lives: become an entrepreneur, save your money, create an economy, hire people, build a business, make your life better. And they're being decimated right now. I think the biggest failure in any of this is nobody's told us anything. Nobody's told us, are you opening in 6 months? Are you opening like restaurants, maybe a month after restaurants? Let's see how restaurants do, then we'll open you.
Is New York City dead?
I think there's a yes and a no to that. I think currently it's very much on life support. It's just, there's no vibe out here. I mean, I live in Fort Lee, New Jersey. I got here in 12 minutes today, literally. I see no activity on the streets. There are no tourists here. Used to come into Manhattan on a Wednesday. It would be jammed with people. It's dead. Is it dead permanently? No. I think things can happen and can be done to change it. One, start being a little bit more aggressive in opening our nightlife. I'm not saying to just go bananas with it pre-pandemic, but open up our nightlife a little bit so people have a place to go and people have a job to go to, and entrepreneurs can continue to do what they do best, and that's build the economy. There has to be a commitment to clean up any perception or reality of crime in the city. Clean it up. I think the offices will and can come back. I think that there's only so much that could be done remotely. As much as people say, oh, remote. Yeah, some businesses might wake up and say, I don't need to have an office in Manhattan. But then again, it's supply and demand. As the rents are coming down in Manhattan, a business might turn around and say, you know what? Maybe it's economically feasible to go back into Manhattan. But they won't if the perception is that it's dangerous and there's no after-hour bars to consume a deal, consummate a deal, no restaurants to take a client out to, no entertainment, nightlife, infrastructure.
We asked restaurant owner Dean Pohl, owner of the Boathouse that's located in Central Park and Gallagher Steakhouse that's located in the Theater District, to give us his perspective. Dean is very, very entrenched in the New York City restaurant market. Here's his story.
My father was actually in the restaurant business in Brooklyn. When I was growing up, he owned Pappas Restaurant in Sheepshead Bay. I entered the restaurant business with my brother Gil. We worked with my father. In 1975. We worked in the Time of Life building. My father had 3 restaurants in that building, and that's where I cut my teeth in the business.
And then when did you decide to open up a restaurant in New York City?
And I came and I said, my God, this place is spectacular. It's the only lakeside restaurant on the island of Manhattan. 2018,
2019, we had great economic years in New York City. How was your business doing?
2019 might have been our highest volume year. From the time we came here, the business grew every year tremendously.
Your customer base is a mix of what?
New Yorkers. People think of the Boathouse as being a place for tourists. But the facts are that 60% of the business is from New Yorkers. The banquet, which is a combination of weddings and corporate work, we do about 140 weddings a year, about a dozen bar mitzvahs, and the rest are corporate work.
What were some of the challenges of doing business in New York City pre-COVID?
So I wouldn't say there's that many differences of opening a restaurant in New York than there are in Long Island. just city agencies, whether it be the health department, the building department, the fire department. There's always someone knocking on the door asking for some obscure permit that either we had or we have to get that we didn't know about.
COVID hits. We're told as city residents, everything needs to be shut down.
People who had parties booked, banquet work, had to either rebook or cancel. So those who canceled, their deposits were returned. And the restaurant closed, the fast food closed, and then when New York was finally able to serve, the location didn't lend itself for takeout. Someone on Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue or on the West Side is not going to call the Boathouse to have a meal delivered to them from the Boathouse. So, and then when we were allowed to open outdoors, and there's plenty of outdoor space here in the park, in the Boathouse, to be able to do that, but there's no business.
So how has New York City been in terms of helping you navigate, and what are the challenges?
They haven't done very much. They've given guidelines to what we need to do, and so we have at Gallagher's, which is my other restaurant, we have the air filters that are needed to make the air better. People wearing the masks, and I'm not opposed to the 25%. Maybe for me, it's easy to say because we have such a big restaurant. So even having 25% of a restaurant as large as Gallagher's permits us to have enough seats. But I think they could have done it probably 6 weeks earlier.
So Gallagher's is located where?
Gallagher's is located at 228 West 52nd Street. That's between Broadway and 8th Avenue. So that's the theater district. Midtown is dead, and it's dead because there are no tourists, there's no theater, and then no office work.
There's a lot of talk about, is New York dead, or will it be able to be resurrected? What's your feeling?
I think it's not dead, but it's severely wounded, and I think that it's going to be 4 or 5 years before we get back to what we saw. And even in the 70s, I was here in the 70s. I worked for my father in the Time of Life building in the 70s. That's when you had 2,400 homicides a year. To a certain extent, it's worse now because of the lack of people on the streets. But we weren't dead, broke perhaps, but not dead. And I think that we'll get through this, but it will take some time. A lot of times, it's going to be a struggle.
Jenny Saldana. Jenny is a breast cancer survivor, and she is a first responder. She works at the hospital, and at the time, she was taking temperatures, and also she was the liaison for all of the Spanish-speaking patients. But Jenny had to go to work. She had to go to work at the hospital. And she worked in fear, as she has a pre-existing condition. But she forged through. She wanted to help out. She needed to earn some income, and she went for it. So you mentioned, of course, the Black Lives Movement, and that you couldn't go out and march, show your support because you are compromised. You don't want to be around a crowd of people like that. But there was also a lot of looting going on. As we know, here are people trying to show injustices, and then there's always the bad apples that are going to bring it down and ruin it for everybody.
What bothers me the most about the looting is that what people don't realize about Times Square is that it is a neighborhood. I live here. This is my home. I've been going to the same dry cleaners for the same 20 years. I've been going to the same supermarket for the same 20 years. And there are a lot of small businesses here that were hurt. Crime is up now in Times Square, which is, I used to like to joke that I feel like I'm like Dorothy around here because I just walk around. It's been so safe. And again, I'm used to seeing, even though it's safe, post 9/11, I was here for 9/11, I'm used to seeing the guys with the guns, with the machine guns. I'm used to seeing that outside my building. I'm used to seeing that.
You have a pre-existing condition, and when it was time to go back to work, how did you feel?
And when I knew I was going to be deployed, because again, we're not seeing the cancer patients that I'm supposed to see are coming in because they're not in desperate need right now. If they're coming in for their surgery or leaving. They don't have time to meet with a counselor. So I've been deployed to a fever station where I sit there with the fever gun, but I'm in full hazmat. I have two masks on. I have a full gown. I have a face shield on.
So you're very comfortable taking
I'm very
somebody's
Yes,
temperature.
I'm very comfortable, and I get tested every other week. Where I see things picking up, and that's exciting. The fact that we can go into, like, I'm performing on a stage for the first time tonight in New York City, and I'm very excited about that. Not outside, not some makeshift stuff, just on an actual stage. And I'm really looking forward to that.
That's great. Speaking of that, you live in a building where there are a lot of artists. How has that impacted your neighbors?
Well, like I said, we all pretty much stayed to ourselves because there were 30 cases in the building. So it's not like you could, like, go outside and do anything. You just kind of kept to yourself, and you saw each other and of course, you see each other at the receiving desk, because all we did was live off of delivery stuff. You see each other at the delivery, desk. You just give yourself a nod and you just say, good luck. And it's one of those things when you see each other after a tragedy where you just want to hug somebody, you just want to hug everyone. Now you can't even do that. I think that one of the hardest impacts was the fact that the lack of human interaction is so important to a human being, and you don't realize that until you're sequestered.
Do you feel safe coming out at night now?
Yeah, more during the day than at night, because at night, especially here in Times Square, because things aren't open, if you're here for no good, because there's nothing going on. So there are people here performing and stuff, and that's fine. But everybody else, again, crime is going up, because where are you going to go? There's nowhere to go. So I'm hoping crime will go down once it gets cold and you can't hang out outside anymore. A lot of the hotels, all of the boutique hotels, the ones not on the main street, but the ones on all our side streets and on our other avenues here in Times Square, have all been turned into homeless shelters. So they're also they're pretty unsavory to walk by now. There's always a lot of people outside. There's a lot of drug activity going on. And so that's not helping the situation either.
Do you think New York City is dead?
Fuck no! New York is never dead. New York will live forever. We have suffered worse. And if you think New York is dead, get the fuck out. We don't need you. But we won't be fully ourselves again for another year. But listen, we went through that after 9/11. Listen, it looked like this after 9/11. I missed the tourists after 9/11. So and it took us longer than that for us to really get back to our levels. It's longer than people asking, is it safe? Is it safe? Is it safe? So no, New York is not dead. New York will never die. Because too many people want to be like us. New York is always reinventing itself. New York is a pioneer of reinventing yourself, and I still believe that if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And that's it, New York forever.
We also spoke to Stanley Pohl. Stanley is co-owner of William Pohl, a food and catering business on Lexington Avenue and 74th Street. They have been in business for 90 years. They know everybody on the Upper East Side, and they've fed them too. A man who has lived a lot of life. He had a really great perspective, and here is his story. How long has the store been in business?
The store's been in business 99 years. We'll be hitting 100 next year. We've been in this location since 1958.
And this is a family-owned business from your grandparents?
My father's older brother.
As we can see, as we're standing here, is very much a neighborhood type of a store. I mean, we've been standing here for a few minutes, and you've known every person that has walked through the door.
Yes, we've got a great deal of people from the neighborhood, but we drive from other outside as well.
So you're also an outside catering establishment.
And we do shipping all over the country.
2018, 2019, how was business?
It was good. Mm-hmm. This pandemic has really affected us.
In what
it's
way?
affected business in general. Mm-hmm. It shifted everything because there was all of a sudden we're very fortunate because people wanted food. They needed food. And they came to us for food, and we were as fast as we can make it, we were selling it.
You had a booming business. The economy in New York City was good. Most of your clients are they corporate? Are they recurring? Are they neighborhood?
Neighborhood, neighborhood. It's residential.
Neighborhood residential.
Yeah.
Okay, so
because the corporate, we've seen that a significant decline because of the pandemic.
This virus was coming, and they were starting to talk about a shutdown and a lockdown. What was your reaction?
We best prepare to get as much stock in here as possible.
So you're ordering like crazy.
We did the ordering, and we started because there's a great demand here for the frozen dinners.
How was the city to deal with? How was New York City to deal with as they were trying to give you what the rules and regulations were?
It could have been a lot better. I mean, it wasn't very clear. They were never very specific as to what we're supposed to do, what we're allowed to do, what we should do.
Your store is located 2 blocks from Lenox Hill Hospital.
Right.
So, as we know, New York City was the epicenter of the coronavirus back in mid-March. Were you in contact with any of the hospital workers? Were they coming in? Were you delivering food to them?
We were delivering food to them. They were in contact, and we were doing hospitals as far down as NYU Langone.
So you didn't have to let go of anybody, you had enough to keep everybody going.
No. As a matter of fact, we operated on a skeleton crew.
So many stores, retail businesses have gone out. You see for rent signs, space available. Your neighbors are gone. You're like one of the last standing.
The turnover is incredible. Yeah, the rentals have been a little lopsided, to say the least.
But once this hit, it really put the nail in the coffin for the most part.
It definitely put a nail in the coffin, a solid nail.
And what about just the residents? How are you feeling about people on the Upper East Side? You think they've stayed?
A number of residents have, well, we know a number of our clients have moved out. They've relocated. Moved
out permanently. Do you think New York City is dead?
No, I think New York City will always revive itself somehow or another. It will revive. There'll always be an interest in New York, okay? And there are enough businesses here, and there's enough interest here to generate that enthusiasm to get it back. I think New York is solid in that respect. It's a little flaky right now, up and down, but these rentals, they've got to come down. You see huge for rent signs, and I've talked to real estate companies. You're only hurting the other stores.
You've talked to the landlords?
Oh yeah, because I said people walk by, they see 2 or 3 stores with huge signs. This place is vacant. That's a dead avenue. Let's go to another avenue. So they go to Madison or 3rd. Okay, they've got the problem is just that over there.
Right.
But they're not helping the matter.
Do you own your property?
Yes, we do.
Okay. We know that you had contracted COVID in mid-March.
In mid-March, I got it. I was very fortunate in that I had what I consider a slight case, and I was self-quarantined. I was tested, and I just stayed quarantined for an extra 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
And what was that experience like? How were you feeling?
I was very fortunate in that I only had a fever. I did not experience everything that everyone else has had. I mean, I caught it in the beginning, and I took whatever measures were necessary. And of course, I do eat healthy, so that's a big plus.
So do you think that you prepared yourself for it from your lifestyle?
Yeah, because I mean it's.
Did you get any therapeutics?
No.
You just self-healed?
Yes, self-healed.
All right. I'm going to chalk that up to the Greek blood.
We wanted to get the perspective from somebody who moved to New York City with hope in their eyes. Maria Miliotis grew up in Virginia, lived in Florida for many, many years, and moved to New York City, a place where she had always wanted to live. She is an image and brand consultant for Faceworks International, also a hair and makeup stylist. She had a great business in Florida, but she felt that if she didn't move to New York City, her life was not going to be complete. But then the pandemic hit. It hit her business hard, and it also hit her personally when she knew that she had to leave to take care of her aging parents. Here is her story. Maria has an image branding company called Faceworks International. And Maria, we're so sorry that you're no longer part of New York City and able to do business in New York City. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came here, because you grew up in a small town in Virginia.
Well, thank you, Ellen, for saying that. It's quite traumatic. My dream was always to live in New York City. Ever since I was a little girl from Virginia, it was the only place I really felt like I fit in. And so it's been a very long road to get there. It took me actually decades. And I always knew that I would eventually be in New York and live the life that I dreamed of. And I had an opportunity to do that for a short period of time.
You grew up in Virginia in a very small town.
That's right.
You lived in Miami, from Florida for many, many years, and you were a model. and then you got into the hair and makeup business, and then ultimately formed your own branding image company. What was that moment where you were like, okay, I've done whatever I can here. It is time to follow my dreams?
So in 2010, I started living there part-time, and I was a seasonal worker. And then I just said, you know what? I just want to be here. So I took a leap of faith. I've been in New York for 6 years. So 2014 is when I lived in New York just full time. I moved to Astoria, and I moved to Astoria because I had a friend on Facebook that we had mutual friends. And I saw that he posted that he had an apartment for rent. And I sent him a message and I said, I'd love to live there. And he said, okay, this is where it's at.
What was it
Yes.
like for all of the years that you worked there? How did you feel? What you finally found your dream?
I did. I finally found my dream. There were times where it was difficult to get jobs, right? But when I would get these exceptional jobs and meet these interesting people in theater, concerts, politicians, um, comedians, musicians, you name it, just these fabulous people, and they would hire me and really enjoyed working with me. It felt like nothing I've ever felt before.
You're living a few years into it. You are a New Yorker. You started to feel like a New Yorker. And then we started to approach COVID, and things started to turn around and businesses started to pull back. And then all of a sudden, it was like there was an abrupt stop. What happened?
So my wedding business that I owned to go out for large events, all of them were canceled. And I still had a business going from Florida to New York, tri-state area. So everything was done. The weddings, the bar mitzvahs, the corporate clients that I had a company, a production company that would hire me on a regular basis. And I worked as a subcontractor with them, and their business was dead. So I was hit so other people hiring me, they had no work. My company had no work.
As you saw your businesses dry up, when did you get to the point where it's like, I don't think I can stay here anymore?
Well, when I sold all my furniture and my jewelry and basically everything I owned besides my clothing and my personal items, and I was on the floor, I just felt like, you know what, okay, I give up. I feel as if I'm mourning a death, really. My whole life as I knew it had been taken away from me. And I couldn't even live there. I couldn't even walk the streets. I was out every single night walking the streets, taking everything in. Just as I was leaving to see our neighborhood, and my neighborhood is predominantly Greek, and I'm Greek, and to see that generations, so many generations of diners and small businesses and shops, all just boarded up and abandoned and done.
What was it like when you came back to Virginia with your belongings? What were you feeling?
I failed somehow. I still kind of feel that way. And I don't know why I can't shake that feeling. It's just, it was just so traumatizing.
Do you feel that New York is dead? You spent enough time there to get the vibration and the heartbeat. Do you feel that it's over, or it's over for a period of time?
Is it over? Is it over for someone that really has a heart and a soul for New York? Is it over for me when I go back and visit and I walk the streets? No, because I love to visit the city. I love, under under any circumstances, that never goes away. History always repeats itself. And I think that it's just a matter of things to come back around. We can't always predict how long, how, when, why, but it certainly will come back around, and maybe in different ways, but that's the way the future is. You know, New York is not the same today or 10 years ago as it was in the 60s or 70s, right? It's always evolving. I really was Audrey.
Audrey Hepburn.
I felt like Audrey Hepburn when I lived in New York, walking the streets, looking in the storefronts, being all dressed up beautifully and having that croissant. It will have that peppy, fun, wonderful feeling if people like me stay there or go back. And that's why I think it's important. And you know what, New York? I'm coming back.
What did you feel the difference was between Astoria and Manhattan before COVID and then after COVID?
So the places that I went to, it just like that took a hit. It was like a direct stab in my heart, because I felt such sadness that their stores, you know, I knew them personally, and these are places that I frequented and spoke to owners and things like that. So when I saw that, it was like, oh my God, that's terrible. It's like we're like a family community here. And also when I say a death, it's like, am I ever going to see these people again? I saw them for years every time I'd get my coffee or whatever. So that was really sad. Now in New York, what saddened me was the feeling of the glamour and the glitz that I just love about Manhattan. And then I just was quite dismal, and the energy, I just like, you have to have your guard up kind of an energy. Don't take the train.
And then you moved back to Virginia and you're taking care of your parents.
Yes. So my mother has, you know, she's in her last stages of Alzheimer's, and during this whole COVID, we weren't able to get any help. So I am grateful that because I was able to be there for her and start getting her situated now with the caretaking that she deserves.
We wanted to get the perspective from somebody that moved to New York City from another country. So we got to speak with Karen Bishko. Karen is originally from London, and she is a singer-songwriter. She lived over in the Park Avenue South area. She was so committed that she even bought a condo. We're going to hear her story, how she literally took off. She could not pack her bags fast enough to go back to London. When did you come to New York City, first of all?
I came in 2008, and I was going backwards and forwards on just a tourist visa for a couple of years. And I really wanted to be there. Like you said, it was following my dream. New York was, New York's magic. I mean, it just is. And then I had a musical on at a festival in New York, and I got an artist visa. So then I for the next 10 years, I was in New York until about 6 weeks ago.
There must have been something about New York City that perhaps London did not have that attracted you here.
I think the energy is a huge part of New York. I think that Americans have a positivity that Brits don't. We're funny and sarcastic, but it's not quite the dream. You can do anything dream that is in America. So what do you do immediately? I mean, that can be uncomfortable for a Brit, but there was something about it that I liked. It's no nonsense and you don't have to waste any time.
February, we start hearing about this COVID thing. Yeah. And then what was your reaction?
It was March the 12th when they decided to close Broadway. I was actually just pulling my dress on to go to the opening night of Six, the musical. And then we heard that Broadway was closing from 5 p.m. or nothing was going to happen. It was going dark. And so for a few weeks, I was fine. I didn't go out that much because where I live, it's just there's no parks, it's just streets, and it felt quite deserted. So I only really went out.
You were living in the Grand Central area, where
Yes.
Grand Central Station is. So
Yeah.
that is very business oriented, a lot of office workers, Grand Central obviously being a major commuter hub. You did ultimately go outside of your apartment a few times. What did it feel like? You went from people on top of each other to
Dead, absolutely dead. And the Grand Central was completely empty. The streets, so Park Avenue, empty, apart from, unfortunately, homeless, lot of drug addiction problems.
how long was it from the lockdown that you had decided that you were going to leave?
I went to stay with some friends in Woodstock. They had it, no doctors, so they were sort of saying you need to get out of the city for a week. So I went and had this lovely holiday, and in the morning I actually went to see a new apartment. I was thinking of moving downtown because the area that I'm in it's interesting because it's Park Avenue, but it does have a big homeless problem, and it had got, I feel like downtown isn't quite as bad. So I went to look at an apartment one day. I was walking back from Greenwich Village, and I walked up Lex, and I was just crossing the road, and someone came towards me shouting and screaming, and he just spat straight in my face. And it went all over me, and it was boiling outside. It was one of those boiling summer days, and I had taken my mask off because it was so hot I couldn't breathe. So it went all over me, including my mouth. And there's a pandemic, so it was bad enough it was just on so many levels, so awful. And that was just at midday. I went home, washed my face, and about 2 hours later I went out again, and I just walked to my corner, 39th and Park, and there was just a guy standing there masturbating, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, standing in the middle of the pavement. And then I got myself a pepper spray, and I found that every single time I went out, I had it in my hand. And then one night I was at home, and a friend texted me, she's a therapist, and she said that a patient of hers had also been spat at near Grand Central. Someone spat in her face. And about half an hour later, another therapist friend texted me and said that one of her patients had been punched in the back of the head and fell to the ground down on 4th and Broadway. And that night, I remember thinking, don't know if I want to be here anymore. And that just made me think, maybe it's time to go home. Maybe it's time. But I had thought I was going to spend the rest of my life in the States. And my mind is still not made up. I'm going to rent a flat for a year. That's what I'm doing here, and see how I feel. But my gut is telling me that it's over there for me.
Particular, the looting. Yeah. Where were you when that was happening?
Yeah, I was in my apartment, and that felt very unsafe and scary. I could hear helicopters above, things being smashed. Everything around me was boarded up. And then, the problem with that was the whole defunding the police situation started after that. And they did, as far as I know, they took $1 billion away from a $7 billion budget, which has not helped with what's going on now with all these criminals and the bail reform.
How did it feel when you had to finally move that day of?
Well, when I didn't, it was gradual, because it's not so easy to just leave everything. And I've left an apartment full of my belongings. I just came here with a few suitcases, but I was thinking about it. And then when I booked the flight, I felt relieved. How did it feel when I left? I cried all day. I cried in the taxi. Now I'm probably going to cry.
Did you just sell all your belongings?
No, I just left it. I didn't have time to do anything like that.
You left it for whoever was going to move into the apartment?
No one's in there. I don't think renting an apartment out in New York is so easy at the moment. I tried. No, eventually I'll get it shipped, but I just didn't even have time to organize that. And also I wasn't sure enough that I want to be here forever. New York will recover. I love New York. Of course, New York will recover, but I don't think it's going to be for a few years. I don't see how it can happen so quickly. It's a condo, so I am hemorrhaging money paying my bills and the common charges. I feel so relieved to not be there. And though I miss my apartment and my things, I'm not looking back or feeling like I wish I was there. Creatively, it's really tough. Like I said, my musical was supposed to be on at a very big, lovely theatre here, which would have been a big premiere, and then it got cancelled. They are still planning to put it on next year, but there's a lot of uncertainty because who knows what's going to happen next year. Also, musicals are much more expensive than any other kind of play. Keep being creative and try and keep yourself going.
Do you think that New York City is dead?
I think that New York City is dead for now. I have no doubt that it will come back. It's New York, it's Manhattan. It cannot die. It's New York. So yeah, it will be back, but I think it will be a few years.
What was crucial to this documentary is getting a mother's perspective. We got to talk to Elle Garcia. Elle is the mom of 2 small children. She is also a wife. She lives in Battery Park City, which was the site of many, many protests. You are a comedy writer, so assuming that you work from home is the norm for you?
Yes.
And your husband is in finance?
He's in finance, yeah.
How old are your children?
My children are 2 and 4.
You're downtown in the financial district. You live in Battery Park City?
I live in Battery Park, yeah.
So how has it been post-pandemic? Did you see some families leave and go to the suburbs or move someplace else?
A few of my neighbors and a few of my mommy friends actually went back to their, original homes. So we did have some families just sort of leave, or if they had second homes in the Hamptons or upstate or wherever they vacation, they went there. The people that I keep as friends, their reasons for being in New York are similar to mine. They want the diversity that comes with living in New York City, and they're invested here, whether they own property or their children are in school here. And a lot of, I am seeing a lot of families return.
You were born in the Dominican Republic, but you grew up in the Bronx, and your husband is from where?
My husband was born in the United States, but he actually grew up in Pakistan.
Do you feel like you're going to get through this no matter how long this pandemic goes on?
I feel like I don't have a choice but to get through it. One, I'm a mom, so I have to find the light in things, right? Because it's not like I got pregnant by mistake. I was looking to have kids, So I have these kids, and this is the world that we live in. And I want them, and I do see hope. And as a New Yorker too, a lot of people keep saying that New York is dead and all these things. I grew up poor in the Bronx, and we couldn't afford to move to the suburbs. And that's the story of a lot of New Yorkers now. People in the Bronx, people in Chinatown, people in Queens, people in Brooklyn. People say, "Oh my God, New York is dead." Well, these people are not going to move. They're from here. But you also have to think about people as valuable. And are you saying that a family in the Bronx or in Brooklyn and in some of these poorer neighborhoods, which is where I grew up in, that's not adding value? So are they dead? No, they're here and they can't go anywhere, and they're not going to go anywhere. And frankly, this is the bedrock of New York. That's what's always built New York. And the businesses, there's a lot of business owners that just can't pick up and move their business elsewhere. My hairdresser, you think my Dominican hairdresser is gonna go to the suburbs to do whose hair? The bodega guy down on the corner of my mom's block, you think he's gonna pick up his whole bodega and go with? No, he's here and he's servicing the community. So
what about your children? How do you explain this to your children?
I think that for children, things are always changing so quickly. She finished one pre-K, and now she's going to a different pre-K, learning a whole other set of numbers and letters. And I think it's a really good opportunity to teach your children about science and what a virus is, you know.
So how are you keeping productive?
So it's funny. I had shifted a few years ago to working on Broad Some Point, which is my comedy platform, which is a digital media company that focuses on producing videos, memes, and articles online. So that is still going.
Do you think New York City is dead?
No, and I'm going to repeat this again. New York City is not dead. There are people who live in New York City who cannot leave because they cannot afford to buy a house in the suburbs. These people are not dead. These people are not going to die, and these people add value.
How was it having especially such young children and the impact on the kids in particular on the pandemic, having them to wear masks, the constant washing of the hands more than the normal, telling them not to touch things, just having them maneuver in a completely different way.
Getting them to wash their hands now, it's fun, you know, because we make a game out of it. And wearing a mask for them is actually really fun because kids, you know, they think of it as a costume. And in both of my daughter's schools, they have to wear their mask all day and they never complain.
You live not that far from Foley Square. There's cop cars on fire. There's been a lot of damage. How did that impact you? The protests that were down there?
The first night of the curfew in New York City, there was a protest that started when the curfew went into play, like at 8 o'clock. I think the curfew was until 8 o'clock, and that's when that protest actually started. And 8 o'clock is my kid's bedtime. And I can see hundreds of people out my window, and you know, my children, they're like, okay, well, we're gonna look out the window too. And they didn't. And the police was just, you know, kind of like doing crowd control. And I have not, all I said to my kids were like, it was like, you know, there's a curfew, people have to go to bed at a certain time. That's why the police is working. Like, oh, can you, you know, and her question was, can you go to jail for not, you know, going to bed on time? Like, yes, you can. I think it really just made me inwardly focus on how important it is that my daughters understand that while their happiness is very important, I think being a happy person is so important, they also have to understand that the happiness of others is equally as important when you live in a community.
Do you feel safe in your neighborhood with your kids?
So you keep hearing about a spike in crime and a spike in shootings and all of this. I don't actually see it where I live, but because I keep hearing about it, I think twice about sending my kids to the park. It's a complex one for me to grapple with because I have a lifelong responsibility to my children to protect them. And part of protecting my kids is building their helping them build an internal moral ecosystem. And so it's challenging me to think about what is driving this homelessness. Sure, people getting released from prison. There must have been a reason why he did that. And sort of, it's forcing me to get more civically involved. And so why are we afraid? And instead of fear, I want to graduate my emotion from like that preliminary fear to action. What's the action that we need to take as a community? Because here I am trying to teach my daughters to love their neighbor. And I'm like, so how do I love this new neighbor that I don't quite understand?
Does this motivate you to get involved in maybe your community board or?
100%. And I think, you know, a lot of families around here just didn't see it because they were in the Bronx around kids, around poor brown kids like me. Now they're in your face and you can't escape it. So let's do something about it. Let's do something compassionate and practical.
May 5th, 2023, and the CDC has finally declared the pandemic over. However, the pandemic affected New Yorkers from all walks of life.
Did it all sort of come at once? Did it really take a year to kind of be back in business?
Glad to say 3 years later, Andrew is out and we're back open, thank God. And they only opened us at 25% capacity. So we opened at 25% capacity, and, you know, it's kind of rough. But I think there's a number of things involved in that. One is that two big tourist-driven clubs, Dangerfields and Caroline's, are no longer with us, especially Caroline's, which is only 3 blocks away from the Broadway Comedy Club. So I think that, you know, when people come to town and they want to see an authentic New York City comedy show, you know, old school stuff, you know, and they're staying in the Times Square area, there are no other real options. It's a great city. I don't want to sit here and bash it. I was born here, I still, you know, I'm in the area there.
So here we are 2.5 years later.
I sold the condo, which was very difficult because I had to do it from here. I couldn't get back. So yes, I have a new home here and I'm really happy to be back in the UK. I feel like it was a move that I needed to make, and maybe I wouldn't have made that move had it not been for COVID. Because I have an artist's visa. My visa had been approved, an extension, but I couldn't get it stamped because the embassies weren't open. When I left, I just packed 2 cases and left the flat full of all my things. And then I did have someone living there for a while before I sold it because it was just empty and I couldn't afford, you know, to rent somewhere here and have that empty. So, but during lockdown, when I came back here, I wrote another musical that I'd been meaning to sit down and write. And then I just had 6 months on my own to do that. So, and then the other thing was that I've been doing a rewrite of a long running show called Menopause the Musical. It's an off-Broadway show. It tours America and the whole world.
We are happy to report that not only did William Pole Gourmet Shop survive the COVID pandemic and its disruptions, but it is stronger than ever, and in 2022 celebrated its 100-year anniversary in business. So a big congratulations to William Pole. As we say in Greek, axios.